the neighborhood. Not that we would, but
more so too, just the fact that the odds of getting a reply are higher.
That's right. That's true. If we get involved, we have some leverage. That's right. Although it's funny, I think of these guys as so important. Of course, they would be responded to, but it's true that we're known. The city's more known. How are we doing here?
Good. Is this your presentation?
No, mine is. Where is it? Oh, that's this. Hello, everybody. Recovered file 1 is part of my presentation. There it is.
Screen shared in
we could, yeah.
You want to do that?
Yes, let's do that. That's a good idea. Thank you, Kate. Kate and I, all right, we're having a busy day. There we go. Yeah, I think it's that one, week 7. All right. Oh, and we're finally being joined by someone from a non-English speaking country today. Ronaldo Limos is coming in the second hour, so that's a good thing too. Yay, right, exactly. Yay for Kate. All right, so week 7, spring break. What we're doing today is giving constructive, critical feedback on what we've learned so far, including on these archetypes. More on that in a moment. Next class is 3 potential ideas. Oh, Chris Fabian of UNICEF will be here on the 20th, and he's done a lot of this user-centered design. As in fact the person who taught Panthea, so it's like the grandfather of the entire thing, right? So he'll be here on the 20th. So archetypes, I asked you to do these 2 slides. Just as a reminder of what I asked you for. And then today we're also going to talk about these 3 concrete examples. Something we need to work on is how these projects are going to be monitored and evaluated. I'll bring in an expert speaker on that, but that's another stage we've got to worry about. Now, why archetypes? Why did I ask you to do this? Well, this is part of the user-centered design process. I'm sure you all figured this out as you were working on it, that if you abstract a persona or a stand-in for the kind of person for whom you're designing, it's going to help you focus on what's really important, what their needs are, and also talk about it in a coherent way across all of these projects. Here's this user, that user, what they're good at, what their challenges are. So it's definitely a way to inform your decision making. And any of you who do web design, have done it in the past, have probably run into this concept of a archetype or persona. So Anand, do you want to talk for a second about personas or archetypes?
So I did some web stuff in the previous job. The designers used to really I loved it. Basically, it helped us think when we were setting out to intervening the design process. We thought about who might our users be, and so one might be a donor, one might be somebody who's really passionate about a specific issue, one might be just curious about what we do generally, and so we would do a bunch of interviews, and we had these little composites where you would talk about, you would come up with a sentence, I'm coming to your website to do X, and then you have some background. You know, I'm thinking about these, my income level is this, my priorities are that. So as we would try to figure out how to apportion space, where to put, lots of pictures, lots of text, lots of what are we putting on there and how do we prioritize it? We would think about who are our users, who's most important, and how do we, it just made us conscious of the trade-offs that we were making and the people we were trying to satisfy.
Terrific. So that's why this funny word kept in at the Media Lab, archetype. Why are we doing this? There really has a distinct purpose, and teams find that it really helps. It gets your usability, your interface design working. Some tips here. We're going to try to share the archetypes. Now, it's admittedly artificial so far because the people you interviewed are not the users, but you can see how this could work with users. And we'll talk about what other people you might be interviewing. You do want to keep the number of archetypes relatively small, so you don't have 20 of them for any one design project. You want to have maybe 3 to 5, so you can play with them like baseball cards and think about the trade-offs. And the bootcamp document that's on the resource page for the site has on page 20 a discussion of this idea. It's very hard to see here, but here's Franklin. He's 38 years old. He's divorced. He has 2 kids. He's diabetic. And this is a composite character profile, just what Anand was talking about. Thinking about Franklin as you're designing this page has extreme tendencies in consumption, preparation. So that made you laugh, right, Logan? Yeah. But he's balancing his health. He's doing his best. So your team is creating this. It could be a fictional character, semi-fictional, but it's a way of clumping users. Seeing them. So everybody see that? Yep, makes sense. So that's what that was all about. Simplify design. Again, we're trying to think about what the needs are based on what Dudley needs. Now, for prototypes, I told you that for the next class, it could be pretty simple. Chris and Dana provided us with a couple of prototypes from their past. So here's a prototype for Citizens Connect. Look how simple this is. It's one page. Help constituents report problems so we can improve the city. See the problem, select, shoot, submit. So for next class, when you come up with your 3, come up with a page like this. You don't have to code the whole thing. Just describe it. Right? Does that make sense? That's a prototype. Right? Okay, so thank you, Chris. And here's one for their summer job program. Here are 3 ideas about how technology can help youth get more connected. Challenges, solutions, challenges, solutions, challenges, solutions. So your 3 could be on one page. That would be all right. Although I urge you to get it slightly more complex with this. Okay, so your groups are going to have to get together between now and the 20th to talk about those prototypes. So consider meeting this week, right, to see how this works. Questions so far about next week's assignment? No? Okay. Interviews. Again, if you want to speak with any specific people, let us know. Oh, and DS&I, the city's going to work on having people from the neighborhood available no matter what to respond to the prototypes. Not necessarily in class, but during the week of March 19th. Okay. So we're moving towards user-centered design. All right, so let's get going. The tech audit with Patrick and Maria and Tala and Tara and Jamal and Luis. Anticipating what you've come up with this week, the city and I have come up with some assignments for you for next week. Everybody's talking about the need for data from the carriers. This group should draft a letter asking for data and explaining the need. And that letter could be signed by DS&I and the city. So I'll post these slides out after class, but that would be a great next step, don't you think? Yeah. And the city is also working to set up a conversation with the Boston Public Library team group, good for testing prototypes.
So this is in addition to
In addition to those prototypes, boy, is this hard. Right, 3 ideas plus draft this letter plus would be good to have a conversation with the BPL team group. You want to talk about the BPL team
Yeah,
group?
I can just add a note. I've had some interactions with the team leaders at BPL, but BPL went through the whole process. They called it the Compass. We just call it Compass. I'm sure there's some better, like, framing that word. But so they went through the Compass process, and they basically, the BPL had conversations with all these different user groups to talk about what the library should be doing to engage them better, to serve them better. And so one of the things that, one of the focus areas was technology. And so the team group was involved in some of that discussion and also gave feedback around, like, how do you engage people in technology sense. And they've just kind of thought through some of the ideas around some entity providing technological resources to benefit them. What could that be? And so we thought they'd be a good group because they thought a little bit about this issue and won't just be the first time they've been presented with the issue. So we think you get better feedback than you would just a person.
Okay. All right, fantastic. So group 1, your slides are up here. They're not as lovely, but they're here. Dudley Street, Dudley Tech Audit. Ready to go?
Oh.
Who's going to talk? What?
There's Judith.
Well, she's everywhere. She's all over this thing.
I've seen that picture.
Okay, so here's all right. So here's practice in an archetype. Does anybody want to talk to these slides, or you just want to show them? Anybody? Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
So I tried to keep, I suppose, Judith's challenges relevant to our project rather than just what she broadly spoke about.
Right.
What she raised was that the city found that there is some populations that were either not receiving information or not responding to attempts by the city to solicit information. And so that's clearly, I suppose, something that would apply in the instance of Dudley, but we're not aware of their technology use, where the tech audit groups are. And that is a similar point to the second point there, that some groups weren't accessing services that already were being provided by the city. It wasn't that services weren't there. And then the third challenge was the need for, and this is part of our brief, of a mechanism that is sustainable, repeatable, doesn't involve us going out and doing it each time. And she said that DS and other, the Dudley Street community is actually has capacity to do something that is like, you know, repeatable and sustainable because we're such a well-organised community. But that obviously the way it's designed has to be good and easy for them to take on. So yep, that was. And then the opportunities. She spoke. The most interesting thing I found was like what she spoke about. Like, why is it that there are some groups who information doesn't reach or who aren't participating in, who aren't providing feedback, and the importance of understanding exactly why, so that when you're doing the survey, it's well targeted or well thought out. She said one of the reasons why is perhaps an issue of trust. And so we had a bit of a to and fro about that, like, what does that mean? Does that mean your surveys need to be from the community? Does it mean they need to be the language? And we didn't really come to a view about that. It was, perhaps maybe you go through forums, not necessarily a door knock, but forums where people in the community are comfortable, so places like the church or at a school function. To be honest, I found those ideas more appealing than the idea of just an outsider door knocking. She said door knocking works where you are offering someone information, not where you're trying to solicit from them, which was an interesting point. Like, we're actually just soliciting information, so I think we should be aware of, like, we're asking someone, we're like Jehovah's Witness coming to the door, you know. We're not actually providing them with the service or information, so I think that's something we need to be aware of when we conduct our survey. There have been previous surveys that the city's undertaken in disadvantaged neighbourhoods that seemed pretty cool.
Really?
Like, there was one, I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, sorry, I think it was Lowell, I think that's what she said, but like, it was a use survey where youth from the community went and stood on the corner and like spoke to, it sounded like pretty disaffected youth, but it was, that was interesting.
But you know, we've talked about that, having some way of getting the community to do it for itself, and particularly the young people to do it for themselves. Yeah.
Right. And she said that we got really like information we should never have got from other surveys. Right. From that type of, like, where it was a, very non-confrontational, out in their area. Then I asked her about company data. Have you guys had success in the past about getting data out of companies? And I think her view was no, but that she might be a little bit out of date on that, but that it seems such an obvious area of, like, heaps of information that why not just ask? But you guys put that as our brief, so.
Right, you got to do that.
Thanks for stealing the idea. Actually, we stole it anyway.
Right.
Guy last week at my test.
Right. Yeah.
And then finally, just advice about Dudley. She was like, be aware, well organised, has its own way of operating. Things haven't worked in the past, that doesn't mean they couldn't work again. Just understand why they didn't work. Yeah, pretty.
Okay, so this is this shares some angles of being an archetype and also just a substantive report on your interview. So an archetype might be more compressed, more like, here's a person at this stage of life interested in X, maybe has access to this kind of technology.
Oh, sorry, totally. Like, we just treated Judith as
I know.
Expert.
She's an expert, absolutely.
Yeah,
right.
But sure, so.
Right, that could be. No, don't be sorry. This is a learning opportunity. We're learning. This is what we're doing. So, at substantive report, it's terrific. This is what we got from Judith. She has lots of advice, and you know, we're lucky to have her. Real utility player here, and a great picture. There she is. Okay, so there's Judith, and then there's also Ramon Soto. Now you're laughing again. What's wrong?
It's just fun to get him up there. He's in shape these days too. So.
Good. So are you. So are you.
He's a friend of mine.
Okay. Okay, how much further can we take? That's great. All right.
What else do you want to know?
No, you're nothing. All right, so here's Ramon. Who wants to talk about the interview with Ramon? What you learned from that? Yeah, go.
Yeah, sure. So Ramon, I guess, another expert. Really.
Right.
I mean, because he was the liaison for the city during the 2010 census. The go-between with the mayor's office and the Department of Commerce. Now he's in the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, but his challenges during the census, he was able to increase the response rate. So he had some good advice, but basically, as he was pointing out, the city didn't have any resources to provide incentives. We may or may not have the resources to do that. Specifically, if we were to use a school and maybe say the first classroom with 100% participation wins something. I don't know, but I don't know if those resources would be available, but we discussed that. The second challenge is really actually three things. It was the communication of the ease of the survey, the importance of the survey, and the safety of the survey. Those were this was the first time that the survey the census only consisted of 10 questions. So that might have been responsible for the increase in response. They write importance on the envelope and the safety of their information, because the lowest responding areas are areas such as Dudley and other low-income, high-immigrant populations who are concerned that once you give this information to the city, they are going to come and track you down. And then the final challenge he pointed to was appropriate responses to questions. He noted particularly that even he himself answered the survey wrong in the under race, because he didn't know which he should put. Apparently they wanted him to check white. He checked Hispanic, even though apparently, according to the Census Bureau, he is not. So anyway, leaving these options open and maybe asking for more user-generated responses rather than giving them 4 or 5 options could be.
You learned a lot through that series of questions.
Yeah,
you really did.
A lot. Yeah.
He actually suggested to leave the race question of blank.
Yeah.
If we even need to ask it at all.
Well, you probably do need to ask it if we're going to get fine-grained information about what populations have access to what kind of technology. It's very interesting information from a policy standpoint and just, outreach, right? Guys, what do you think? Yeah?
And I think it was translated into 77.
Over 7, yeah.
Wow, the census. Yeah. Okay, that's
Yeah.
might be a hurdle for
Yeah.
the tech audit.
I think we're going to stick with the DSNI standard of 3.
Right, yeah.
But
Right.
But they were they also determined how to print the surveys based on the tract, as they call them, within the census. So they look at the general populations of the area and will determine the 2 or 3 languages required and then print up the survey in that way.
It sounds very useful as an interview for you.
Yeah, he gave us a tremendous amount of time too. He was like
Really?
over an hour.
It's great.
Yeah. So those are the biggest challenges.
That's great. All right. Opportunities.
In terms of opportunities, actually before the census, like 2010, they spent more than a year launching an educational campaign of some sort. And during that campaign, they emphasized the 3 points of ease, safety, and ease, safety, and importance. So those were the 3 points that they kept on hitting each time that they went out to target the targeted community. And he used a variety of ways. He tried to first identify trusted voices within a community, and then he reached out to them and asked them to communicate the message to their community instead of going directly to the people. And so he mentioned the libraries, community centers, schools, church leaders. So I think in moving forward, there's an opportunity for us to engage with the teachers. He gave an example of how, you could have elementary school teachers put a piece of survey into little kids' backpack, and when they get home, usually, the parents would open their backpack and say, like, what is this? And then that will actually force them to read the survey. And I don't know if they'll answer, but at least it will force them to read it.
Yeah.
And usually he says that in immigrant communities, it's actually the younger people who are doing most of the work within the family that requires English proficiency or that requires any sort of where you have to answer a question. It usually goes through the kids who can, who actually read to the parents. So it's good to target the kids a lot of times. And he mentioned we can work with the elections office to understand like the demographics of each community. And then he also mentioned Mira Myra, it's like the refugees. I don't know the full name. But, yeah.
It's Massachusetts state thing, or the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Association.
Yes, and then Office of New Bostonians, I guess for new citizens. And he actually said that they hosted this, it's kind of like a one-day thing where they invited all the ethnic newspapers, radios to come, and that's where they launched, communicate the importance of the survey. And the mayor even showed up. So that really helped in terms of raising the response rate. And then finally, he gave us a very important advice, which is in order to find out like what technology the users trust, you can ask them questions like, do you conduct business online? So like, do you do banking online? And if they say, no, then that's actually more useful than asking, like, do you buy your books on Amazon? Because doing banking requires, like money. He says that for a lot of immigrant neighborhoods, they actually don't trust like technology for stuff that involves security. So that's the question that he suggested for us to include in our survey.
Yeah, you guys have now so much information. You have a lot of thinking to do as you build this. I mean, your prototype might include a big pre-planning process, a lot of outreach. That would be your first step. And you would lessons learned from these interviews would make this a repeatable experiment. I would hope that you develop a survey set of techniques. It'll be more like a toolkit than anything else. Here are the things you should consider as you're building a tech audit.
He gave us so much advice.
Yeah,
He
a lot of
how
advice.
to plan out this whole thing.
Right.
You have a map and you put yeah.
Okay, right. Well, now you're going to have to compress it and come up with what's really useful. All right, now there's even more here. All right, so Deb and Dan, let's go through these a little faster. So what did we get from these?
I can help. Actually, what you said is one of the first challenges we're really concerned about trying to make this it's not just one survey, like a sense-like survey, but it's something that the people, the community can or the city can repeat it often, and they can have a historical trend, and they can react to those trends and act on those trends. So I think one of the biggest challenges that Tech Goes Home was trying to highlight is to how can you make sense of the information people have, of what information is missing about people of Lily Street. How can you bring up that? For them, it's very important to find out how connected people are, because they understand that if people are connected, they can change, or they can sort of act as a community.
Yeah.
So, but how can you have access to that information? They don't really know how to have access to that information, because they get us some information based on people that attend their programs, but even that information they consider is really biased, because they don't really know if the programs are accessible for everyone, or if only people with particular interests go and reach out to those kind of activities. So they're really concerned about saying, first you have to segment your population, and first you have to find out what the different groups you want to reach out, and how can you reach out to them. I think that was really important for us to understand that how can we sort of work more with community groups or hubs or nodes, maybe churches or more with the SNI or schools. How can we create in our toolkit tools for each one of these actors, so they can collect data and somehow we can make sense of it as a whole. I think that's like sort of our biggest challenge, and they make really I think they're really focused on saying, this is what we do. We try to teach technology to communities and make them more responsive or active to use technology. But these are the challenges.
Right. and using these trusted intermediaries in a way that also gives you good information.
Yeah.
That's really hard.
So I think in the opportunities, they saw that the biggest thing, based on what the public usually wants, is to have access to city resources.
Mm-hmm.
To how can people have access to regular bureaucracy from the city, or maybe access to it, and to all the city resources that I've provided. How can they have access to it through the use of technology?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge breach there that they hope to really try to. They said that if the Take Goes Home is trying to help these people to have access to city resources, but a lot of people want to have access to their resources, but they don't know if when they're available online or how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The internet is something that is not used to those things, or they're not as connected. So I think they saw a great opportunity to frame it that way.
Right.
To say, by having this approach, you can have access to city resources.
Right, and without it, you really can't.
Yeah, I think
these
that
days.
was one of the biggest points. And we had a lot of other technical ideas. How can we do this?
Right.
And we discussed everything from paper surveys or nothing awards or community activities to SMS or other, but we don't really know.
Great. So this will be a crystallizing moment. Your next period. All right. So let's look at the existing solutions for tech surveys. So you've got the public radio tech survey, doing lots of interviews, largest research study. That's one way. You just call people up and say, "What are you doing?" And big questions there about whether you're reaching them on a cell phone or a landline phone. How different groups use different ways of communicating. Yeah, Maria.
The interesting thing about that was that that's not actually the way it worked. So basically, these different public radio stations over the air made multiple announcements and kind of incentivized people to go online to their websites and take the survey. So it's actually an online survey. I don't think that they actually had 30,000 people call it.
Aha. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Online survey. That's one way. Here's one. This Seattle looks like it is a telephone survey.
They had a couple of raffles and things like that.
Yeah, to incentivize people. This question of incentives is going to be really interesting for the tech audit. 100% participation, you get a blump. Something, whatever the blump is. That'd be interesting. Learn more about that. Seattle residential telephone survey. All right, so that's more traditional. This is a way of finding out. This is how Pew does things too. They call people up and say, "What are you using?" And then Eurostat community survey on ICT usage. How was this done?
So that one was actually a paper survey that was mailed, and then they followed up. Kind of like the American Community Survey that they do in the United States, where you have this first round where you send the paper, and then you follow the phone, and then if that doesn't work, then you actually go in person.
Right, and there may not be one modality that you guys end up recommending. You may have multiple ways of trying to reach, based on the research that you've done, the people you talk to. All right. That's where we are now, and your assignment is to write a letter for Comcast. That's one thing, and also to go forward with your prototypes. All right, the cultural punch cards. The next group.
One quick note, sorry.
Yeah.
So I think what came out sort of overwhelmingly is just to think about the communications and incentives around the audit itself.
Right.
Think about the actual audit. And think about pairing whatever that audit is with sort of the existing platform we already have. It would be nice to have one project that's completely standalone, or might be sustainable and manageable to figure out how to embed this with school enrollment or regular sort of youth out-of-school time surveys or any of those other actually not common.
Fantastic. Yeah, you keep learning that over and over again. Reuse stuff that already exists. All right, now group 2, the cultural punch card. We think group 2 could move quickly to testing some prototypes. And you could stick up flyers in Dudley. Text here. Learn out about a free cultural event happening each day this month in Boston. Use your free texting platform to manage this. These things exist. Would people sign up? Could you measure how many people actually took advantage of this? Or you could register a Twitter handle, free near Dudley, and tweet free events. Now, this takes some work. You'd have to actually tweet free events every day for a month. And then ask people to tweet back if they go. But then we've learned something if you did this. So this is one of those high-touch moments for the cultural punch card. You could actually start testing. What do you guys think? I'm looking for significant eye contact from the members of this group. Tyler, what do you think?
I think it's hard to ban a conversation with people who we talked a lot about. We don't know what culture means to us. We don't know. Would it be offensive to say, like, here's an event at the MFA that
you should go to. Yeah,
have
that's right.
To, yeah, because we're poor people. You know, and the My Dot tour that Kate worked on, and also we'll talk about Discover Roxbury. They have a lot of cultural, virtual events where people get on and share their own experiences with areas and kind of make up their own history, you know, in big groups and people live in communities. Like, this is our culture.
Yeah.
And so are we assuming that they don't have culture and
let's
expose you to this, like, white person's culture from hundreds of years ago? Or should it be more of, like, let's help, you know, create more or expose the culture that already exists in your community? So there's sort of tension.
Yeah, there definitely is. And this is the fishbowl point. Are you looking down at the fishbowl or actually thinking about how the fish are feeling in their place?
Ask something?
Yes.
So it might not be that you make flyers and put them out, but I'll go to Dudley and see what flyers you need.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, Will.
My other concern about implementing something right now would just be having enough to fill that pipeline, like knowing what's going on enough for the next 30 days. I don't want to run like a boy incredible kind of thing where someone is, you know, tweeting in and they're not getting this much for the next month, and then when we actually try to launch it through the mayor's office or something in June, then they're not as enticed.
Yeah, they're already frustrated by the lousy job we did during the pilot. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, I saw some more hands. Yeah, Leora.
I'd be more interested in terms of college flyers that say, like, instead of text to learn, like, text to tell us. But I don't know.
Right. Like, text for us to learn, but why would anybody do that?
Right. But like, and I'm not sure like what is culture, like something that someone would text an answer to, but like that's sort of more.
Mm-hmm.
Or I mean, maybe it's like maybe we do like find out what kind of things are going on in Dudley, and then ask people to like text some of those things so we know if we're reaching people at
and that's going to require finding out what's going on, which needs connections. Yeah.
Well, just building on that too. I mean, I think oftentimes local culture is related to local commerce. A lot of people make their money off of producing cultural events. So I mean, that could be incentive, right? If you're a local musician, then you're getting the word out. But then the question becomes also like, do these cultural experiences be free? Is there some kind of cap with the vision?
Right.
Or
does it all have to be free?
Level of all have to be free.
Yeah.
Different kinds of culture.
Yeah. It's almost devaluing, actually, someone who might like to charge for people. Yeah, it really depends. We've got a lot of contextual questions here with the charge. Okay, duly noted.
Yeah.
Duly noted. All right, so, yeah.
I don't think we can say what culture is.
No.
Because that's a debate just among individuals, too. So,
yeah.
I mean, as much as we want answers to all these things, there are answers to some of these things, which is why there's problems. So, I guess there's no, like, this is what culture is for that community.
No, that's what they're saying.
Yeah. Support, like what the intention is for this.
Yeah.
Like talking more with people.
More with actual people. Yeah.
Well, like, if there's some sort of, if we develop connections with people in the community who are willing to be the point people for like, hey, I'm going to this event in downtown Boston, or I'm going to this event in Dudley, they're advertising it in their own network. That could be like, the information, it could be like free, things around Boston. It's going in both directions, but I think there needs to be a source coming out, so it's not just like, hey, here's the mix.
Okay. All right, Barb, you want to say something?
I was just going to respond to something I also reiterating the importance of the idea of trying to find out what the event is about. Make sure that we're experiencing this.
Right. Okay. Right. I love this client-centered response. Okay. The feedback is strong here. All right. So you talked to Kate Boog, and there's some. You like the picture? Yeah.
They're really good.
Yeah. Right. Challenges. All right. So was it Brittany who mentioned the challenges of talking to Kate? Who was? Oh yeah, Diane.
Tyler and I were on a call with Kate. She's excellent and sent in from Mexico.
Fantastic.
So Tyler, like hop in whenever. But Kate worked with the New River Mechanics on My Tours, which was a really fantastic project in Fields Corner, which is another neighborhood, in which they engaged local youth to submit their accounts, I guess their history and their experiences in the neighborhood, and create an online platform for us to create like a walking tour. And there are definitely, she had a lot of, which sounded like she had more supportive resources than we might have available to us, but it was definitely a very interesting example. And she was, as I mentioned before, very sharp about, you know, how we can find the right people to talk to or get a good sense of the community when we're just like popping in there very temporarily as outsiders.
Yeah.
One thing I found kind of interesting was a lot of, well, not a lot, but she talked to a good number of people who were kind of, seemed like maybe like the forefront of gentrification in that neighborhood, and I don't know if we've seen that in Dudley, but it was an interesting mix.
Okay, so big article in the Globe this past weekend about Dudley Square, which we know is not Dudley. What did that article say? Anybody read it?
They broke ground on the new city building, the Ferdinand building.
Yeah, and what's going to happen in that big building?
They're going to put the Boston Public Schools offices there, and then fill a back part of it too. It's going to be some modern green building for more office space and commercial space.
Right, so real dedication from the mayor's office on Dudley Square. And you guys want to talk about that? What's going on?
Yeah, it's the second time it's happened, interestingly, because last time it happened, it wasn't able to come together. But so now we've got the financial commitment and the political will there to really bring Dudley back to what it was. I mean, I've heard the mayor say that he used to go to Dudley when he was a little boy, and there was some department. I don't know. But so he remembers like it being a center of commerce, and you used to go from whatever neighborhood you were in, Hyde Park or wherever, to Dudley, and it's just not that anymore. And so they want to sort of bring Dudley back to what it once was, a bustling center.
Right, so the question is whether that leads to gentrification, or because Dudley has kept the price of its housing down, whether that just stays in place.
Yeah.
So that everybody can afford to live in Dudley forever. Yeah.
Regarding the gentrification, Kate actually sort of identified the gentrifiers. She called them like yuppies. It's like people read their blogs, check out what they're writing online, because they're good at identifying cool things, culturally kind of things.
That's interesting. All right, so we're going to find the yuppies and promote their activities. Okay, moving on with just the other interviewee. This is funny too, Christopher Carter. He's the youth leader, program director. What's that? Yeah, he has a chiseled outline next to the chiseled. Well, clearly. I love your attitude, Dave. It's really great. All right, so, opportunities, foster a sense of ownership, help with ideas of how to engage youth, especially middle school and high school. So this sounds like a good contact for how this cultural punch card is actually going to affect kids. Sounds like that's something you got a lot out of.
Our town experience, he spoke to sustainability as a key challenge. Just
right.
What, in his context, it was financial stability, but in ours, may just be a project sponsor or at least someone to make sure it's carrying on.
It keeps going. Let's talk about the models of this that you've already seen. Let's go to this presentation.
I just want to note also, he particularly mentioned with youth that 14-year-olds, there's this gap for 14-year-old youth. There's no program specifically for them.
Yeah.
And that one of the questions that brought up for us is, as you create these products, how tailored do you want to make your audience? Is it better to launch just a very specific demographic and start with them, especially when you talk about cultural events that will appeal to certain kinds of demographics more than others. For us,
that's really interesting.
The customer.
Right.
Conversation too, like finding an audience.
Finding the audience. Yeah.
With events, it's very hard to target.
And you might just make a decision based on your archetype of what you're trying to do.
I guess the mayor's office programming for youth doesn't include 14-year-olds, and so that seems like a gap.
That's interesting. It's tweeners. All right, so let's look at what you guys discovered here. What's that? I'm always doing this wrong. All right, go back. I'm there. Okay, now what? More. Full screen. Got it.
So we tried to look at the three things that we looked at are ones that hit on different parts of the goals of cultural transfer. There we go. The first one is networking and rewards. That's making money, which if you hit next, you get, I don't know if we have 45 seconds for the video. But,
it's not responding. Sorry.
What?
Do whatever you want. Of course. Of course. There's a video about it?
I should just great.
I did hit the bottom, but it didn't play. It went there, and then it grays out. Okay.
Oh, well, I'll just the bonds are distributed all throughout the neighborhood, and you have to find the one, you have to find the match. So you have to meet up with other people, and they had like all these community events that were about finding a match, but also about bringing the community together. And then once you have the ad, you get money. They distributed, I think, $65,000 of bonds, which translated to that you can only spend on local businesses. So.
Fantastic. And there are a bunch of virtual currency programs like that across the country.
What I really liked about this one is the focus on finding other people who are
finding the
match. Community, and they spread it out so that the bonds were on top of each other.
Oh.
I learned yesterday.
Okay, great. Okay, that could be a lot of fun.
And then this one is, it's a card that gives you discounts in the Bronx. Those are some of the places. And what was interesting about this is that it wasn't for everyone in the Bronx. It was for people who volunteer at the Bronx Council on the Arts, or like businesses can sponsor people. But I'd like the volunteering part was interesting because it meant that you were involved in this promotion, and in exchange you got discounts.
Mm-hmm.
And then
the Discover Roxbury is just an example of the kind of cultural events that are happening already in the local community, and they're hosts things we already incorporate into the content of what we're creating going forward that celebrate the past locally. So bike tours and historical tours and all sorts of opportunities for school groups and adult groups to go and participate in what's already happening.
And because they're led by members of the community, there's more of a sort of working to define what does Roxbury mean for people in the community. What are the valuable things that's shown?
Right. We just have to decide who the client is and what the goal is, and there's almost no limit to what we can do. Once we decide that, all kinds of things will happen. Okay.
One other suggestion is to look at an organization called Cool Culture.
These virtual currency things too. I know the city's really interested in this. So games that involve currency. Now there's some criticism of those games that they don't end up being real, and they fall off their legs a couple of years after you start them. What do you know? Yeah, that's a problem. Okay, Group 3 Charter School forging right ahead. Here, Andrew Bott has agreed to meet with you. This is great. And the city will work on times for the week of the 19th, actually, which is the 20th. So this is, if you'd like to do this, charter school group, this is available to you. How do you feel about that? Yes, I get a thumbs up. Excellent. Okay. I think this will be good. Thank you. And thank you very much to Chris and Dana and Nigel for doing that. All right. So again, briefly, so here's Deb. She has some challenges. Now this is more like an archetype, I would say. Time constraints, trying to deal with lots of different people. She's a principal of a school. Morgan, you want to talk about this? Or?
I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay.
She has to sit down with Deb, and she's powerhouse principal. She was actually the starting principal of not a charter school, but it was a pilot program.
Right.
And she actually had really tremendous community outreach, but it was really because of her personal initiative and the extreme amount of time that she dedicated to going to community meetings, reaching out to businesses. And so we know that time constraints and whatever program
we design for the principals is going to be a huge, huge barrier to kind of overcome, and hopefully what we can do is make it a little easier for them to do this outreach rather than kind of doing it the old-fashioned way that I think she started to make. Also, you're dealing with multiple constituencies. Obviously, you have the guardians, greater community of the students, the administration, staff. A good example that she pointed out was that they were trying to get the whole community involved in getting their students to school on time. But the problem is if you're a shop owner, you're across the street from the school and a kid runs in at 8:15 to try to buy something, to get that shop owner to say, no, school starts in 15 minutes. There, don't buy something, buy it later. And so there's obviously some kind of conflicting interests with the school goals and the community goals in some respects. But in other respects, safety and emotional health was something that she stressed over and over again, especially in a community like Dudley. And she said a program that she did was asking the community members to help watch the students walk home. So they had established some kind of set routes, or at least, the majority of the way home would be along certain streets. And she then asked those neighbors to help, keep an eye on the kids, and kids would help keep an eye on the community, and they were all kind of looking out for one another. And that was a really great way to reach out to the community, make them feel invested and involved, like they were helping out these kids. And we thought that would be a great idea, something like that in Dudley, given the park that they had that was named after the young girl who was killed. And that's clearly already, a peak interest of the community. And then some challenges. We thought this was also kind of some ways that we could work with the principal, and that's introducing him or her to existing resources. Tech Goes Home and a ton of other programs that Deb told us about are wonderful resources already for community engagement and other such activities that we think we can help connect with the principal with. And then, again, easing communication burdens. That's a lot of kind of leaning on that time problem, trying to make it easier to overcome those barriers. And then methods from recruiting others who have resources to contribute to the school. Again, Deb said she did this largely by personal outreach, and we're hoping that there might be a way we can systematically use technology to make that easier.
Sustainably and systematically, in a way that could be evaluated against benchmarks or metrics, getting other groups in to help. Okay, terrific. So there's Eva, and there's Judith in the picture. All right, so just briefly on Judith, looks like some of these same concerns, integrating the school, addressing students' needs outside the school, stuff we've heard about in terms of challenges that she's expressing, and opportunities for working with her, deep knowledge, clear understanding of goals and vision, and able to respond to ideas. So this is also more archetypal in a sense. This is as a user, these are things you could, if you abstracted from this, here's, Joan, and here are ways that she might use this site. And this is a person that can respond to ideas and has strategic vision, but might have some limitations in terms of technology. So just taking advantage of that. I want to go to the things that you found because they look very interesting to me. Similar technology, number one, class talk. I think we talked about this during the earlier stages. Danielle, do you want to talk about this?
I can say a bit about it.
Yeah.
I won't go into detail of all these things unless you have questions about it. What we really found in the conversations and just our research is that there is a lot of existing technology to link teachers with parents to another one of the examples we have is Donors Choose, which is, as you probably know, a method by which students or classrooms and schools can sort of say this is a need we have and get donors to get involved. And this is also an open source learning management system addressing, one of the questions that came up of how can schools keep parents more informed about their students' performance and how technology and the internet can be used for that.
But the interesting thing here is
so I think
there is no dashboard.
There's lots of technology addressing different needs, like providing information or engaging the community and addressing donors, but we don't really have an idea yet for how to bring it together. And you guys might remember that one of the ideas for the charter school that resonated a lot with people is to have a dashboard in which the principal might be able to communicate, and it was maybe interactive where students could present some of their work, where there might be just things that the school was being tracked against, sort of the goals they set and how they're doing. And it would just be great, and we talked about creating a website for that, and I think it was you guys who said the dangers of creating websites.
Right.
We saw the principal doesn't really have the time to sort of update that sort of thing, so we're still struggling with trying to think of a technology that could bring these different sub-technologies together.
So when you talk to this principal, have some ideas when you go in and some very simple paper prototypes, even if incredibly simple, so you have something to react to, and see if you can work through 2 or 3 models and see how it goes. See how that goes.
And one thing that mentioned in the conversation is that the kinds of data that we choose, it would be more powerful if there were community members that actually influence. So things like tardiness, where people can know that you're taking the time to work on that together,
that's good.
An abstract test where you're not going to communicate much time.
Right, they just feel crushed by it rather than a sense of agency and autonomy that they can do something about it. Yeah, that's good. All right, so group 4. Sorry, yes.
I just wanted to say Andrew Bott, who is the principal at Orchard Gardens, they've tried a couple different things around parent-guardian communication, and they've learned lessons about what works and hasn't worked. So that would be helpful.
That's good. Yeah, Leora.
There's a small enough, and I want to say that it's happened at Hangout in Academy, but it might be melded into schools, where they ask each student as either 8th graders or 9th graders to research what. Actually, I don't. At some point in high school, before the public admission stuff starts, to research what college they think they would like to go to, and then list what they need, like SAT scores, everything that they need to get there, and they post for all of the kids.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's about like a constant reminder of sort of what the goals are, and like it's honestly not what you can do school regarding
first grade, right?
It might be interesting how they
yeah.
in terms of internally created goals, but the point of posting them is like self-reinforcement.
Right. Brittany, you want to say something?
I'm saying if you start earlier,
might make a difference. Yeah, as really as possible. Okay, so you have a great next step, which is to talk to the real principal. Okay, group 4, community visioning. Khalil, Logan, Hannah.
So we Skyped with Eric Gordon, and we typed him a civic gamer. And he's the director of Engagement Game Lab, and one cool project that they are doing right now is Community Planet. And they did a pilot, I guess, with the Boston Public Schools recently. He told us about some of the failures of that program that helped us understand the challenges we faced. And so basically, the program was launched, and they got 500 participants. And the question they were trying to answer is what makes a quality school? Yeah. And the whole point of Community Planet is to have a planning system that engages people to interact with each other and to learn about planning in a fun and engaging way. And then maybe they can use some of that information, but really it's almost like a community engagement and mobilization tool above all else, sort of, So challenges were outreach, just reaching enough people. What they did was they went to a ton of school district-wide showcases and set up a booth and made little tchotchkes and handed them out for free and tried to drum up some support. But he said that in particular, because of the linguistic challenges, and in this project, it was useful talking to him because they did have Spanish, Creole, and English. And he said that they were only able to find 5 participants who were Spanish-speaking and 0 who were Haitian Creole. So one challenge with the outreach component is being very direct, targeted with your outreach. Participation barriers that one might face are just, being super busy, language diversity was one, and lack of tech access of faculty. And the third challenge is he didn't feel like the Boston Public School System, although they sort of maybe commissioned this project, they didn't really take ownership of it in a way that would legitimize it in the eyes of the community they were trying to reach. So one thing he said is it's important to communicate to people that they're being listened to without being dishonest, and they need to feel like the decision makers are paying attention. And because the Boston Public Schools didn't put the project link on their website, it seems sort of like they also didn't want to commit until it was successful, just in case it failed.
There are lessons here for the tech audit, too. What other groups say, we're doing this, we're in here, and we will listen to the results.
Exactly.
So same thing, legitimacy and buy-in. All right, so opportunities, design a game. We knew that Eric would say this. Design a game, understand the role of the game in the greater community visioning process, and overcome all those barriers by having a game.
And I think the game is just, it would be one small component you still use traditional
Right, but maybe you drive up participation by having some arrow go up in the neighborhood if you've actually gotten, more people in. So imagine all the things you could do. Kiosks that respond not only to your touch but also to your smile. I mean, all kinds of things. Have animals that leap up if you actually vision something. Come on, there are games here we can think of, and there's the playfulness does a lot with humans. Not so deadly. Visioning that it makes it more kinetic, more alive somehow. So I challenge all of you on the outreach. Now, okay, that was fun. Talking to Eric was fun. Existing technologies, number one. What's that?
So that's the software towards GIS planning, where you can actually put in like 3D images and sort of design what it's called. So it's really meant to be this way for picture.
Okay.
So this is a newsletter that allows you to sort of push out to the community, and it's quite simple. It's this company's called Contribute. So it's sort of like Contribute or Tribune.
Yeah.
It's meant to be pre-existing format that you can just load up.
This is really interesting. So death of local news everywhere. So part of the visioning process could be setting up a really sustainable, easily updatable local news platform.
Here's what's going on.
Yeah.
There's events. There's things to link to. I didn't probably capture all at the bottom. At the bottom they have different focus. So they had farmers. They had people who were growing stuff. They people who wanted to sell. So you could really sort of just go through and really push to the community what you want. And the cool part about this is you could also translate it into different languages.
Yeah.
And so they could access it in different versions, so they get some information.
Interesting. Okay. The visioning part, a little harder. How does this become persistent and sustainable so you can plan any kind of process, or are you just reporting news all the time?
Right.
Okay, so you got that. Existing technology number 3, SimCity.
Yes. So we actually found a game called The Res. And it sounds kind of bad, but it's done by Native Americans. So together a 5 to 10 to 25-year time about the reservation.
Yeah.
And so what they did is they actually built the reservation, and the community actually had a chance to make decisions. So at various points, you were charged with making 2 decision points, and then they tracked each individual user's growth over 25 years. And as you made the decision, the community will it impacted the community actually. And the decision didn't just impact once, but throughout. Like, so the decision you made 5 years continued affecting the other decisions you made.
Okay.
We had this brilliant idea that maybe we build up the parents. That's a lot.
Yeah. Okay. It has some intersections with Eric's putting value on things. I value X, Y, and Z, and then the resulting neighborhood looks like that. Okay. Some problems with how do you access this? Correct. So you got all that. All right.
Everything's a meldable.
All right. The perfect thing is a meld. All right. So we don't have a next step proposed to you. Your next thing is if there's somebody specific you want to talk to in the neighborhood, let us know, and you come up with some prototypes for the next class. Okay. Group 5, community outreach. All right. So sorry, the text ran off the bottom here, but who wants to talk about Mr. Teixeira?
Started off thinking about Alberto. He called himself an accidental community organizer. He started off doing translating. Y'all may remember him from the documentary. But then he saw this opportunity for the Cape Verdeans to really be a part of what was going to happen in Dudley or miss the boat completely, and he was really impassioned by this opportunity for his community to claim some power, claim some space in that. So as an architect, that's how I see him. He's still this community organizer. He did the door-to-door, and now he still goes to make these home visits to try and talk to parents about how they're engaged in their students' or their kids' lives. So he also really stressed the value of relationship and trust building as far as community engagement and how he views that as something that needs to be revisited in Dudley.
So we can enhance his visits, and we can have him test whatever this thing is we come up with.
Yeah, that was the thought there was basically actually he is a good archetype. So,
yeah.
maybe questioning the assumption that the clients that we're serving that we want to serve the community members directly. Maybe actually a great way to serve them is to serve them indirectly by serving people that have a very, if there's something we could do to help them do his job, that can help a lot of people.
A much greater impact that way, outreach. Okay. Great source of information, needs of families. That's perfect. That's exactly what we're trying to aim towards is the student population, how we can improve their connection. So here's Judith again. There she is. Missing data, demographic picture of Dudley. Okay, involving community leaders, opportunities to work. I love this. You really focus on the opportunities here with these people. She's a bridge. She knows everybody. So that's an opportunity for her, which is special. Give me just a tiny kernel of something from Judith that informs your next step, this group.
I mean, there were two sort of ideas that came, I think, from my mind, came out of the conversation with her. Actually, one was from her, one was from Nigel. One from her was to think a little bit differently about touch points. So she used an example from the 90s where the Haitian community AIDS was a real issue, and Haitian women were not engaging with healthcare in the city of Boston, but they would bring their children in. And so what she did was actually she worked with pediatricians to get at the mothers. And so she set up women's clinics, talked about setting up women's clinics within sort of pediatricians' offices. And so I think for me that was sort of a think about unexpected ways where people are engaging with the system, but not necessarily for themselves or in very unexpected ways. And the other one from Nigel was to think, we've talked a lot about incentives, but to not think about incentives as like money or a book, but also to think about incentives as content. So he used the example of Tech Goes Home, which is an incentive for engagement, and there's a value add, so it's sort of a gift to get. So you're engaging people, adults and kids who might not otherwise be engaged, but you're really giving them something. You're not saying, join our database or come to the meeting and do work. It's, here's something that's of value to you, that's going to be important to you in your relationship with your kids or important to you as you look for a job, and use that as an engagement vehicle.
That's useful to a lot of these design briefs, actually, thinking about what incentive actually means in this neighborhood. Okay, so some existing technologies for outreach, teen outreach program. Top, what happens here?
This is one of the examples of the outreach program.
Yep.
So basically, program varies, has a lot of the different practices. Some is facilitating some discussions in class or outside of the classroom as well, for people mainly to prevent the pregnancy and dropouts. And the partially volunteering, and then some provide volunteer opportunity for students as well. So our takeouts might be the school is the best way to approach the young population area, and the BSNI maybe provides some opportunity related to some cultural issues, or students might have some English opportunities in the BSNI as well. But one problem is different targets, like the older generation, we might choose the different approaches to them.
Okay, place speak consultation program. Yeah.
So it's this was just a platform kind of idea that I came across, which is obviously going to be potentially challenging from a technological point of view. But what was really interesting about it was this idea that people pin themselves on the map and had a private view of where they were, where their residence was, and then so they claimed ownership, as it says, that once they're verified, they can then respond to neighborhood-based issues based on their location, and the people who are actually asking them to respond to projects or whatever it might be are able to weight their responses in relation to how far away it is from their residence. So it's an interesting way of neighborhoods being able to see, is this issue really important for people who are sort of within a 200-yard radius of what's going to happen versus a 3-mile radius. So I just thought it was a really interesting platform and a way of thinking about how to weight people's interest in an issue as we move forward.
Very sort of geographically rich, contextual, and also it's private to the user.
Correct. I mean, obviously in the context of Dudley Street, I suspect there'll be some privacy concerns as well as some technology usage concerns. But if we're thinking about sort of underserved parts of the Dudley Street community, there might be ways to use that kind of weighting to sort of weight it towards, or think about particular issues weighted towards people who don't typically respond to outreach campaigns versus those that respond all the time, or based on a geographic point of view. I just thought there were interesting ways that we might be able to weight things depending on who you want to hear from. A bit like a stratified.
So interesting. Yeah, really, it's like the gradients in the
So
responses.
this is in beta testing in Vancouver.
Yeah. So adoption in Vancouver is going to be very interesting for us to know. I mean, how it's being used there.
In Vancouver, it's a government resident program.
Yeah.
And so if you go onto the website, you know, they say, tell us what you think about XYZ program based on where you live, but you could easily tweak it to these.
Okay, fantastic. So for Group 5, also, we don't have specific assignments for you, except if you want to talk to someone else, let us know, and prototypes for next week. So, oh, no, that's wrong. I did another one here. Somewhere it's right here. It's okay. Everything's okay. There we go. Okay, that's Group 4. Okay, we got this. Presentation 1. No, that's not it. I guess we lost a file when I did that, so hang on. So Danielle, you've got a innovation. I want to give you a chance to do that now. So either Danielle or Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, here, I found yours. Do you want to come and do this? Here. Okay, it's going to start going. Is it automatically timed?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Back.
All right, I will step away.
So I want to begin by asking you what you did when you bought your laptops. I see lots of you have Apple, so maybe you only went by the brand name. But I personally spent many hours on the internet trying to decide which laptop to buy. I spent all this time on these websites comparing different sort of laptops, trying to figure it out, just to make sure that the money I spent on it, which was over $1,000, was just really well invested. And now when I think back to sort of big decisions I've made before in my life that involved a lot of money, probably the most money I've ever spent was on my college education. And I'm sure it's the same for you, that's just the most money you've invested so far. And that's my high school. I graduated from high school before the age of digital photography, so there's no picture of me. And really the decision I made for college was based on sort of maybe consulting a few books, some rankings, talking here and there to some people, but when I compare it to a decision like a laptop, I really didn't research this sort of decision a lot. And that's pretty crazy because these are the figures for 2010. If you look at how much people are spending for college, it's just a huge investment that's being made on a considerable, just sort of flimsy information base. And the technology I want to introduce to you guys is one that sort of uses the power of the internet and crowdsourcing to try and get people to make more informed decisions. And it's a website that you might have heard of called Unigo that creates user-generated college reviews. So it's college reviews by users, so students, for high school students or who are about to go to college. It's been around since 2008, so a couple of years now. And what sort of problems is Unigo attempting to solve? What's lacking so far is really centralized information on how to choose a college, how to choose what subject you might want to major in, and also simply the fact that a lot of the information we're getting is from colleges themselves, who obviously try and get you to buy their product, and you're not getting very good information or only anecdotal information on the actual quality from users. So what makes it Unigo interesting and relevant, especially from the point of view of sort of the topics we've been discussing? One is that they have a crowdsourced approach to just getting lots of students to submit reviews of their colleges. They have sort of an online questionnaire, and you answer a bunch of questions, which they put together on their website. What's interesting from a user perspective, too, is that you can use this wealth of reviews to search reviews that are most interesting to you. So you might say, I don't know, I'm from a very rural community, and how did somebody who is also from a rural community deal with attending a very urban college? So you can have like a very, very focused search for somebody who might be like you. You can also chat with current students for a small fee. I think it's $30, which is
one of the few ways that Canada also tries to monetize its approach. Thirdly, what makes it interesting is sort of their thought of, you have lots of college reviews, and their question was obviously also, how do we organize this big data? And I think it's one of the issues they do still struggle with to some extent. They found some technical solutions, so creating sort of rankings. But what I found interesting too is that I love the article we read about innovation as problematizing solutions, and it seemed to me that they were almost sort of like using the dating site approach to get people to make better decisions. So you have something called college match, where you provide some information about yourself, and they try and just output suggestions for you. What are some of the challenges? I talked about one already. Big data, if you have lots and lots of reviews and all you're really doing is filtering them, that's not all that useful. Like very often you just want one summary. And so they do have an editorial team that creates sort of overall summaries. This is the one for Harvard, where you see the links to individual reviews to just give you sort of like a broad overview. A second challenge is competition. There's commercial website called College Power that's doing something quite similar that started more recently. And the third I see is how to really make money off this. They have some big investors. In early articles I read, they talked about having advertising and sort of market research. I haven't seen any of that really going on, so I do wonder what's happening. That's it more or less. I've got some questions up there. What struck me is that in some ways they're not really collecting the information that might be most relevant for college choice in the longer term. They're not collecting information for graduates and salaries, and I think that's something that lots of colleges struggle with, and it would be really interesting to use with the power of the internet to get more information on that. I also think it's a great model for other countries in history. Right. Okay, terrific. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. Oh, yeah, a little fun. Yeah. Yay. And so Elizabeth can bring this to another country yet to be named. What would that country be?
Possibly Germany. It's great. The UK.
Possibly Germany. UK, right. All right, so Danielle, do you want to go next? Let's find open recent. It must be right here. There it is. Okay, then Ronaldo's going to get on the phone with you. Is he already there? Okay. Have you chat with him until we're on our way? Okay, go for it.
So has anyone heard of Better Lesson before? Okay. So I wanted to choose something education-centered because that's my background experience. And Better Lesson is an education platform that brings together lesson plans from teachers all over the country. So we've been founded in 2008, actually here in Boston, by a group of teachers from Atlanta and Boston, all TSA alums, who wanted to find ways to share their creative practices in the classroom. So they put together really great lesson plans. They want to figure out a way to both crowdsource that to get people's feedback on it, but also to share those lessons with other teachers. And it's currently led by the founder and CEO, Alex Groth, and it's a for-profit model. So districts can opt into this network and organize all their lesson plans for their teachers within the district. So that's out. So here's the problem. So again, there are creative teachers with outstanding lesson plans. They have no way to share their ideas. So a great teacher comes up with something in her classroom, and it stays in her classroom, or it dies if she doesn't use it next year. And then there's no collective knowledge or information here. Sorry.
Oops, sorry. Oop. There he is.
Yep. And so this is just an example. This guy is doing something called modeling transverse wave motion. I have no idea what it is, but it's a really cool thing that he can't share. So the platform combines social networking. So you usually go on as a teacher or an administrator. You create your profile. So what school do you work at? What subjects do you teach? What grade level? And then you also can upload your own lesson plans to the site, and you can share those lesson plans, and people can recommend them if they really like them. They can comment on them, bookmark, give you feedback. So it's a way for teachers to share those practices. And the question is, how's it working? So as of January 2012, there are 93,000 lesson plans uploaded, over 880,000 downloads of the lesson plans, and then there are 6,600 teachers using the network, and then 1,700 school districts. So in terms of scope, it's moved very quickly in the last 4 years, but there's still the larger question of how that actually impacts classroom instruction, both from the quality of instruction for teachers, but also how it impacts student learning. And then I just wanted to share a personal example of using Better Lessons. So I, 2 years ago, worked with a friend of mine who started a school in Mahula Bay, Kenya, and so we brought his teachers over to New York for teacher training, and we used a Better Lesson as to give them access to a different way of thinking. So teaching in Kenya is very much based on still on rote instruction, like writing on a chalkboard. So this opened up a whole new world for them, and it's something that they're now using to share lessons. So it's not only a national thing, but now it's becoming global.
Hey, yeah. Fantastic. All right, so now we're going to bring in Ronaldo. See where he is. Okay. Want to start over? Put your Craig Mark. Looking funny. There he is. Want to do invite? I know, it's so terrible. Takes a long time. He'll come. Did he get the wire and stuff? Yeah. Ooh. We're 1 minute late. So.
Do you want to start on the Hangout with him?
Sure, whatever you want to do. Well, if we invited him, then he should show up.
Yeah.
Ronaldo. Oh, so frustrating. Come on. This is what we do in technology. We wait. Yeah.
I don't think you just did the other communication.
Just stop it and start again.